All right, for more on this story, we are now joined by legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala. Always a pleasure to see you, sir. Thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Good evening to you, and also good evening to your viewers.
All right, I'd really like to get, your view on all of this that's happening. Of course, the biggest issue being the issue of jurisdiction at the moment, with counsel for President Ramaphosa saying this case is crying out for court intervention, and one would suppose that he's talking about the civil court in this particular case, because it does seem that the president is wanting to push for the civil court to take over. What happens in this sort of a situation where the matter emanates from the criminal court? Is the president in some ways trying to bypass criminal procedure?
I would say so. In fact, the better way would be to short-circuit this whole process. Now, on the merits, the president, it favors him because he's going to say, but I'm not the one who's supposed to discipline misbehaving prosecutors. You have the National Director of Public Prosecutions, you have even the minister that can intervene. But I, the president, do not meddle in the cases of the NPA, rightfully so, because that particular institution should be independent. However, procedural-wise, in the manner or the timing in which you ought to say that as the president, it is not at this stage. As Advocate Mpofu was at pains to try and explain that when the time comes when you need to plead, you must come in and then say, in part of my plea and my answer to you, I'm going to plead as per Section 106 of the Criminal Procedure Act. Why do I do this? There's a perfectly created system and legislation, which is the Criminal Procedure Act, which then allows you to raise certain objections, if you so wish, as a person who is an accused. If you have a problem in the manner in which you have been brought to court in, don't only attack the person who is bringing you to court, also deal with the NPA, because without the null prosecutor certificate, the president will not be there. Now, if you are only going to focus on part 2 of your application and not focus on the actual instigator, the person who created the green button that can be pressed by the former President Jacob Zuma to institute proceedings against you, that's where you have it wrong. And which is what Advocate Mpofu was at pains in terms of trying to say. I'm only acting on the instance of the NPA. I've received a certificate that says I can prosecute anyone. I'm of the opinion that you fall in this category. If you don't, then let's meet at court in which that will be the appropriate forum when you have to answer whether you are guilty or not.
Are you suggesting then that there was a sort of, I'll use the word error, in terms of, handing out this nolle prosequi? Should that not have happened from what you're saying?
Now, from the submissions that have been made by the NPA, they're of the opinion that it did not include the President Ramaphosa. Now, rightfully so, but you also have an opportunity as the NPA to try and clarify all those things. They were incorrect in providing a blanket null prosecutor certificate. It shouldn't happen like that. Every certificate must be tailor-made or specific to or accused specific, so that we know exactly who we are referring to. Because if you then now say we are issuing a certificate this is going to include, or anyone who's involved in this matter can then be prosecuted, you're opening up wider powers and giving your powers as the NPA to private individuals, something that ought not to have been done. So from the side of the NPA, certainly it was issued incorrectly. And when they were given an opportunity to say, go and fix the mistake that you have done, still to this stage they haven't done so, and which is why you have a null prosecutor certificate that is not accused or tailor-made for specific individuals, and you can't have a certificate which is like that.
And in terms of the a civil court, under what circumstances, just going back to our earlier discussion, under what circumstances can the civil court take on a matter that is indeed emanating from a criminal court? Do we actually have precedents for something like that?
They are in certain instances. Let's remember that when we're dealing with the High Court, we're dealing with a court that has inherent jurisdiction. So it is not made or created through legislation. It has inherent powers. It can create its own powers and privileges as it goes along, just as long as those powers and privileges are in line with the principles of our Constitution and in line with the rules of natural justice. Now, in this instance, the court is then going to say, we are only going to intervene in instances where another part of the law perfectly caters for that type of disputes when it is absolutely necessary to do so, or is going to waste time to go back to the criminal court, for example, to try and get that appropriate relief. Now, in this case, you don't have that, which is why in the initial stages, it was even surprising to say, Why is this matter brought on an urgent basis and the court actually agrees when there are alternative remedies that are there? Now, you have the Criminal Procedure Act, you have the criminal court that takes care of this type of pleas. The only instance in which the court will come to an urgent application is when there are no other alternative remedies that are there, other than the order that ought to be issued by this court. Now, in this instance, we have a criminal court with a judge that can be able to adjudicate these matters. They can be able to decide when it comes to the no target to prosecute, which is a valid defense as per the Criminal Procedure Act. Why then do you want to short-circuit the process? Because you are expressing that you are the president. There's a certain brand or reputational initiative or attributes that are cool to you. When it comes to us, we all should be equal in front of the law. Everyone has a brand and a reputation to protect, whether you're the president or not. So in this instance, there are no special circumstances that exist that would warrant that this matter be dealt with in a civil court rather than a criminal matter. If there is, then definitely the president has failed to prove, precisely to me, as to what are those exceptional circumstances, what type of prejudice is going to be suffered that can't be suffered or can't be remedied at a later stage, or that would warrant him not to go through the criminal process like any other person.
Mr. Zikalala, what could the possible consequences be? Say, for instance, the president does indeed get his way, and this is then dealt with in the civil court. Could we find ourselves in a situation where if the civil court indeed gives a final order, final relief to the president, that we'd find ourselves in a situation where there is a usurping of power by the civil court, and that might, then be going towards a dangerous precedent that might then be set going forward?
Definitely, and I think that's what the court is trying to run away from, because it would mean if I have someone's against me and I've been told to appear in court on Friday, on Thursday I would go to the civil court and say to them, they are trying to arrest me, can you please come to my aid? They don't have charges to prosecute, they don't even have evidence against me. If they so do, then they must be able to show it to me. Now, what you are then doing is short-circuiting the process, but most importantly, we are ignoring that there's an existing process that has been tried and tested with proven cases and a perfectly created forum in which that particular dispute can then be ventilated in. So definitely you're going to see an insurgence of things which are similar applications which are going to come in, unless the court will make a clear determination and say, here we were dealing with an exceptional case. It's not an ordinary case that would usually come in. These are the factors that you look into when you're making a determination which is similar to this one. But I for a lack of a better word, maybe we'll be convinced tomorrow where there are more arguments. But there are no special circumstances that exist in this case that would say short-circuit the process, do not allow the normal process then to go through, and then allow everything to run in a normal sense, especially when you are not dealing with the person who has put you in this trouble, which is the NPA. If you remove the erroneously issued nulla prosecutor certificate by the NPA, you would not have the president sitting in that particular courtroom. So deal with the real cause of the problem and not the auxiliary problems.
All right. Always a pleasure speaking to you. I wish we had more time. Mpumelelo Zikalala, thank you so much, sir. He's a legal analyst, of course, weighing in on that particular story.